So I'm going to be talking about program evaluation and research. This is slightly different from the charity evaluation and research that was there before on the slide because, I think the kinds of evaluations we can do go beyond just looking at charities. Lots of government programs, for example, would be very valuable to evaluate. There are loads of non-traditional kinds of aid that we might actually really want to think more about. So what is the value of political mobilization or particular trade deals, etc. So there's loads of different topics here. So let me be very broad and say, let's talk about program evaluation. So I'm going to start with actually just a short story about a school that was being built. This is a true story. And there were some people who were trying to fund a project at the village, and they wanted to figure out, well, what kind of program should they support? And they decided, well, we're going to ask people. So this is a participatory approach. They went there, they talked to the villagers, and they got their opinions. And this is, people can quibble with this approach, but, it's not, at first glance, it's not a terrible approach, really. It makes some sense. And people said, okay, well, we want a school. Okay, great. You want a school. We can build a school. Where do you want the school? We want the school in the center of the village. Okay, great. We can do that. So they built this school. And when they were building the school, they also put in, latrines and opened it up. And great. Again, they thought everything was going quite well. But they later on found out, after they had already allocated the money and began the project, that there was actually a school quite nearby. So they were wondering, well, what happened here? How come, we just built you a new school and now we find out that there are very few children coming because there's this other school that means maybe a little bit further out in the village, but it exists within this village. It's still quite close. What's happening? And turned out that the villagers knew when somebody comes in and says, oh, well, we can build you a school, then they'll also get some latrines. In the center of the village chief lived there, and he wanted some nice new latrines right near his house. So, he talked to all the villagers and said, hey, okay, when these people come in, this is what we're going to tell them. And the point of this story, it might seem a little bit, distant from research, but people who are behind this, they really did honestly try to figure out what would be the best thing to do. They did some research, they asked people, and they still came away with entirely the wrong idea of what people why this was happening, why people were saying what they were saying. So this is actually a little bit of a danger in research more generally. We might think we know the answer, but a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. So taking a step back, I'll return to this point in a moment. It might help to just take a moment to think about, okay, well, what kinds of studies are we talking about here? Mostly I'll just be talking about impact evaluations. So an impact evaluation really depends on trying to figure out what would have happened in the absence of the program. So, there's this nice little comic from XKCD here. I used to think correlation implied causation, then I took a stats class, now I don't. Seems like the class helped. Well, maybe. So, to bring this back to, our not exactly knowing what's going on, we do need more than one study. There's loads of things that can go wrong in a study that were already a little bit previously alluded to by Kirsten. But so here's a slide. This is from Schoenfeld and Ioannidis. They were looking at a review of all sorts of studies on the effect on cancer. And basically, the headline results were everything both prevents and causes cancer. You have some studies that say milk is great for you, and you have some studies that say milk is terrible for you. Coffee is good for you, coffee is bad for you, green tea is good for you, green tea is bad for you. It's, you have all these very disparate studies. And so what you really need to do is you need a lot of different studies to start to say, well, okay, well, hang on, how can we understand what's going on here? And the same thing is true in development. So the problem is a lot of the studies that we do are actually bundled together in different ways. So you do a program, you study deworming, and you find great effects. Well, that depends a lot on what the underlying baseline prevalence of the worms was to begin with. There's some other programs that I think also we've had a mention of microfinance. Microfinance is a great example of something that can have wildly different effects. You kind of need things to be screwed up enough that microfinance can help, but not screwed up too much, then microfinance won't really help you at all. So there are really all these interaction effects that are unmodeled and just left unsaid. We say we're measuring the effect of a program, but the program doesn't stand alone by itself. It's nested in a particular context. It might depend on whether the people in that area have good health or not, or have education or not, or what the political structures are there. There are lots of different things that could be affecting the results you're getting. So this is actually real data. This was gathered by 8th grade of different kinds of effects found. Now, it doesn't mention the outcomes here, but that's sort of similar to the previous slide as well. There are all these, but the point is that they're actually widely dispersed, and they depend a lot on context. You can do the best possible job you can trying to model all this, and it's rather unfortunate. I mean, so I started looking at this work. So a bit of my background, I went to do an econ PhD originally because I thought, oh, well, that'll help inform me of what I should be doing now to do the most good in the world. So I did the econ PhD, didn't really quite get that out of it. But I said, okay, well, that's fine. I'll go start to work at the World Bank. And I said, okay, well, now I'm going to start this organization, 8th grade, that's going to read through all these different studies. And now, clearly, I'm going to know what to do. And it's just not that simple. And as I kept on going through the literature, it just got a little bit more and more depressing as to how much things varied and how little we actually know, for sure. That said, there are some things that we've learned. I shouldn't say it too much, but just to get to a second major problem here with existing research is that we do tend to look where we can find results. So there's this common story about a man has lost his keys. The officer says, well, where did you lose them? Oh, I think I lost them down in that alley. Well, why aren't you searching in that alley? Well, there's a lamppost here. Here's where I can see if I can find them. And a lot of research is sadly kind of like this. Yeah, I mean, we can only study certain things very easily. There's some opportunities to study certain things. So, for example, it's very difficult to look at more macro-level impacts or more long-term impacts of particular things. There's just some areas that are more suited to RCTs or whatnot. So there is a little bit of this issue in research as well. So just to wrap up here, really, my overall point here is that there's still quite a lot we don't know. It does lend it to being an area where we can really learn a lot more. And research is an area where you do have to put in some investment of resources up front that you're not immediately helping to save lives with right now. But the hope is that in the future, you'll be able to do that and the payoffs will be greater in the long run. So thank you very much.